Hey Scott, how you
What's up,
doing?
Nathan? Good. We're back in
We're
one
back.
week.
1 week. What did we talk about last week?
Uh, we introduced ourselves
Why don't we do that
eloquently.
again? Since this is number two.
Number two. All right. All right. Why don't you go first? I like following your lead. You're buttoned up.
Oh, you're setting the bar low, I see. All right, thanks, Scott. Again, quick introduction. We're Scott, Nathan. I am Nathan. We've been in the technology space for, I don't know, a combined 40 years, probably, something like that. We've started companies, exited and sold successfully. We've failed at starting companies. And now with this podcast, we're just trying to share what we know, share our mistakes, so that others don't have to do this. And hopefully we'll be bringing all of you some good insights on how to get started with your own gig. And with that, Scott, go for it.
That's hard, and that's hard to follow. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, I'm Scott. You did a really good job summing that up. Current software engineer. I like tinkering around building things that people like and see value in. I have failed way more times than I have succeeded. So I have a lot of advice on what not to do from my perspective. Yeah, it's me right now. So today we're going to be talking about you have an idea, vetting your idea and the competitive landscape and how you decide if you move forward. I am really excited to hear what you have to say because I don't think I do this very well, and I just get too excited and I just wind up probably building too prematurely because I have the skills to build. But when you're a non-technical entrepreneur, that costs a lot of money and your fate is in other people's hands. Let's start with how do you come up with an idea? Where do you look?
So I actually don't know how to answer that particular question, because I think coming up with the idea is usually the thing that happens more organically. You're either at your day job, or you're working on a hobby of yours or a passion of yours, or whatever it may be. And as you're doing that, you're starting to feel some potential, some tangible potential in this thing that you're doing, whatever it may be. And I think most often, you might come from a place where, because you're thinking of, this hobby of yours or this idea of yours in the moment and on the spot, I think we kind of de facto just think, well, here's a great idea. I could start a company or start something here because I'm thinking about this now, right? You also said earlier, a thing I wanted to touch on, because you said something like, I'm quick to go want to execute on things, right? When an idea pops up, right? I don't know if that's necessarily specifically just you, right? I think it's just today's society, today's generations. Maybe, I'm not sure. Microwave society, everything needs to happen instantaneously and right now. Chase the next shiny object, so on and so forth. And I think most people would like to, today at least, would like to just, an idea comes up and they would like to see something happen immediately right after, right? And what you and I kind of talked about, on numerous occasions, is like, I think I'm more cautious when a situation like that arises, because I'll try to think about some of the unknowns or blind spots that I may not be thinking about right now. So I think the first thing that I would typically do, right, when an idea, whatever it may be, right, let's say we're passionate, we make a lot of homemade pizza, for example, right? And all of a sudden I'm like, hey, here's an idea, maybe I could start an online blog about making homemade pizza, right? And while I'm doing this, I have the idea on the spot. So I was like, it's a great idea, I'm just going to go do this, and where can I go start a blog, right? And maybe before jumping right in, I would recommend stepping back a bit and doing some research. And I think research in this case is just starting with Google, right? Searching if something exists out there. It's maybe talking to your friends about the idea that you have, just to see if they, one, I guess, maybe like the idea of, your idea, whatever it may be, and starting something around this, starting something more formal around this. And, hopefully even better, they have, other, input and feedback that they could provide on this, meaning they might know of a company that already does this, or a blog that already does that, or a friend of a friend that is already working on an idea like that. So sorry, that's a long way to say that, before I jump in and, go build anything, I'll spend time, researching as much as I possibly can. Obviously, saying that, I also typically try to avoid analysis paralysis. And, I don't want to be researching for months and months and months, because it is pretty easy and cheap today, for example, to get started with prototyping or trying an idea out to start your company.
Mhm.
So I don't know, that was a long-winded answer. I don't know if that was what you were expecting or not, Scott. Curious to hear what you think.
I think so. I'll step back to I have a couple of things to say. I'll step back to how I get ideas. And I really like what you said about it being organic. But I think you have to be looking a little bit for it to be organic. So I have a lot of weird hobbies. And in those hobbies, you can find problems. And then usually my ideas come from the problems I can solve within that realm. So that's kind of piggybacking on it should be organic, which I totally agree on. I think I have a little bit more like intention when I walk into a situation. Like I just bought a compound bow and I just started picking up archery. And I was like, you look around and see with your lens, like, oh, what are things in this industry that they do well? What are things that don't do well? Because you can also bring things they do well to your niche or tech or whatever. And that's how I actually started my tech company. It's a quick war story, two-sided marketplace. I was going to seminars and I hated the experience. So I was like, wow, well, there's an opportunity here because these people are using platforms like social media and Eventbrite to communicate where these events are, how much they were, et cetera. So like, why don't I just build a two-sided marketplace so that people holding the seminars can get information in their customers, and then people have a better buying experience.
So before we go too deep in that, for those who don't know, what two-sided marketplace?
Good.
Can you say more?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, essentially, like you have, at least how I understand it, is you have buyers, you have a marketplace for people to purchase things, but you also have a marketplace for sellers to sell things and make money. So it's catering, like Airbnb, right, is a great example. You have people posting their homes and they run a business off that, but you have also people renting those homes. So it's a similar thing. So that's this is getting a little bit away from vetting the idea, but at least just my mindset and how I come up with ideas. And you made a really good point about this like microwave society, and I think it's exacerbated by the tools that we have available to us. Now we have no code. We have Instagram. You can verify ideas. You can run ads and just have a landing page. You can build a landing page in Card and just start collecting emails immediately without any real technical expertise.
And those are all things that we're excited to show everyone, right, and talk about at in future episodes here. But I think I'm coming from, while you're absolutely right, and those are all very easy things to do, right? We are fortunate today that we can start these and vet these ideas, quickly and easily. I think I'm just more coming from a more conservative place, maybe, where I'm like, well, before I put effort, or even yet, before I put any money into this, let me do at least some very basic due diligence. But it sounds like maybe you jump right in, or jump in a bit more.
I like to think I do due diligence. I usually build things I use the like Tim Ferriss model of like build it for yourself, then build it for 10. So maybe I don't do enough due diligence. I'm like, I'm gonna you do this thing for myself first, and then I'll see where it goes. So yeah, I probably don't do enough due diligence. How do you,
But for
I
example,
guess,
like
yeah,
here's
go ahead.
maybe a great example. For this particular podcast, this show, right? You and I have been talking about this for some time.
Mm-hmm.
We're now, recording this second episode, right? What'd you do before, kind of, coming to me again saying, yes, I really think this is something that might provide value to people. So let's do it. Right? We didn't just jump in and start recording,
Sure,
right? We
sure,
didn't
sure,
just
sure.
jump
Yeah.
in and create a website and get a name and do all these things that people are excited about because they're visual, tangible, things that you can start
Mm-hmm.
showing, talking about, and all that. So, what'd you do in this case, for example? I mean, and obviously
Yeah.
you and I talked about this, right? But I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
teasing it out
Yeah.
for
Totally.
the audience.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I see a lot of keep it short. I see a lot of content online from technical people it's all the how-tos, how to learn JavaScript, how to build a website, these types of things that are inherently valuable. But I was consulting and helping non-technical founders with some technical problems that they were having or pushing forward. And the same issues kept coming up. And I was like, oh, wow, this is really interesting. Like, I can't find a show like this or a place where people can come listen and learn from war stories from people that have started businesses that are also technical. And if they're a little bit, it's like the Tim Ferrisses. It's almost out of reach. Like me and you are real people. Like you can contact us and like talk to us. So that was my like in the field research. And then I think you went online also and did some due diligence looking to
Yeah,
see if you
yeah,
could find something as well.
yeah, exactly. And it's because and I think basically I did exactly what I was talking about earlier. As you and I were discussing this as an idea, I honestly do believe we can provide value just inherently based on our past experiences and what we've done right in the space. But there's always this challenge of sure we may have value to provide, but if there's 100 other shows just like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it worth the squeeze, right? Is it
Yeah.
worth the effort? Because maybe other people out there do it a whole lot better than we do, right?
Sure.
And to your point, like you said, and what I mentioned earlier, ultimately that's a lot of what I did is I just Googled, searched around, went on Facebook. There's groups that talk about pretty much anything on Facebook these days, and asked around. Go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all these different platforms where you can find YouTube channels. Same thing. They're all a lot of the content ultimately gets published in 2, 3, a handful of platforms today. So you go scour those for a little bit, and when I say scour for a little bit, I mean it took a few days searching here and there. I didn't spend months looking for this, but you're right that pretty quickly there we could see that there are bits and pieces of this, but not in this form, not in like a more attainable, fashion, not without a multi-$1,000 price tag.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's going through that, that I think led us to saying, yeah, this is a good idea. Let's do this. Right. I think just slight tangent, but well, actually maybe not so much a tangent. I think it's also part of when you have this idea and you want to start putting things in motion, right? There's also the associated costs to getting your idea off the ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this particular case, that was a consideration that you and I talked about, right? Because it's a relatively low cost other than time for us to give this a shot, right? And I think that's a very different thing to consider and to weigh in your balance when you're starting your idea. If you have material costs associated with your idea, or labor costs associated with your idea, or employee costs, or whatever it may be. So it's taking all those things that kind of led us to a place where, yeah, there's an idea here, right, for this particular show. And I think this thought process, this research process, basic research process, right, can be applicable to any startup idea, right? At the very, very onset, right?
This is a unique situation because, like you just mentioned, this is low cost. We hang out, we have a good rapport, we hit record, and then there's other things we have to do after that you can outsource relatively easily. Let's say you're working on more high cost for labor. You need a little bit more technology behind you. Where's your point of, I have something here, like, and you would put the effort to start rolling into that?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. I think that's probably a couple shows just on their own.
Yeah, it's a
But
good
the
point.
short answer, honestly, what we've done several times in the past to shoot down ideas just as much as to kind of vet these ideas before we take it on to the next step, is you have some low cost, i.e. even free tooling that you can use to just do your first round of vetting. And by that, I'm thinking Google Slides, right? Or Microsoft PowerPoint, or pick your favorite tool for presentation where with just a little bit of time, you can spend that time kind of building either kind of like a pure presentation, presenting your idea, something that you could then take to friends, family, coworkers, your network on LinkedIn and Facebook and all these different social platforms, and just present to get feedback without necessarily even having a product yet, right? But you could get types of feedback. Yeah, this is a great idea, a lot of excitement, all of that, or people don't understand it, or people don't want anything to do with it, or again, worst cases, they'll tell you, hey, I already have that. Somebody else, ABC does that over there and they do it very well. And that's what I bought, or that's what I use, or that's where I go, whatever the product may be. And that's just time, right? And I think, if you have more time, or if you want to spend 5, 15, $50, right? Because it really isn't that much. You can go to a fiverr.com and ask somebody that's basically a PowerPoint producer or a Google Slides producer, and you work with them for $50, right? Or whatever it is, $25 for them to essentially build a mock version of your product, your idea, your website, whatever it is, in a Google Slide, right? And you can take that and go ask people to click around with it, present it to people and get that sort of feedback. And that's what I would start with because it's the cheapest, easiest, most accessible way to do it. And then, of course, and this is also why I'm saying these are probably shows, that we could go in way, way deeper on the topic, but there's a whole market about prototyping tools today, right? That if your Google Slide show and presentation kind of passes that first screen, right? That first, vetting screen, right? Then you can start thinking about, okay, should I go look at tools for prototyping this, building this? And again, these are still 2, 3, 4, 5 steps before you engage employees, before you engage technologists to build this for you, before you talk about websites and web apps and servers and all this stuff, right? So yeah, that's kind of what I would do and have done in the past.
That's great. That's great advice. I think, like I started a business and I was like, wow, there's so much I didn't know. And then I learned a lot and I was like, let me just write a course on how I did this. And I spent months writing a course because writing takes a long time, and then put it on Gumroad and no one bought it. And it's like, well, that was interesting.
And why is that?
I have a couple of theories. I think courses are really interesting because you either need an audience or known expertise in an area. And I just don't think I had enough eyes for people that were looking for that. So then I just made it free. But it was a great learning experience. And
Did
courses
making
are
it
fast.
free change anything?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, which is an interesting point. Because I think it was an audience situation where people would inherently find value in it, but maybe they didn't like the mechanism, maybe they didn't find value. Like there's a lot that could have been done by like, hey, here, I could have done that in a day and said, here's an outline of what I'm thinking. Like, here's it for free. What do you think? Like, is this valuable or not? And then it's like, oh yeah, but I wouldn't buy it, you know? That would have been way more worth my time than spending months writing this course. I learned a lot, which is great. And I think the learning experience was great. I see people do this with courses a lot as well. But like, I have a specialty, so I'm going to go build a course platform. Like, I'm going to build myself a course platform for my course instead of going to Kajabi or Gumroad or literally like a PDF or a Notion link. It's like, hey,
Teachable or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, whatever. Like, you don't need to pay someone to build you this thing that already exists, which piggybacks on your point of like, use Google Slides, get in front of people, get the presentation, you know? Yeah, it is fascinating. So that's an experience where it just went horrible for me and I should have listened. Like,
Yeah, I think there's
inherently knew
also the
that, but I
whole
don't know
course
why.
space, right? I mean, that again, it's probably a topic in and of itself, but I think back to kind of the microwave society more and more today, I think people just don't have the patience to go through a course or
Mm,
read through something, right? Today
hmm.
is YouTube Shorts, it's
Yeah.
TikTok, it's Instagram Reels, it's all this stuff, right? And even YouTube videos and podcasts where you can listen on 2x the speed and get the content in half the time, right? So asking somebody to sit through a course, read through a course, and actually have to do something like work, that's new. So yeah, but again, that's exactly, back to what we were saying earlier, why I would have in your shoes, right, would have spent more time, I think, kind of vetting before I spent hours and hours writing, right, and
Hmm.
producing content for the course.
Yeah, it was interesting because I knew that inherently too, but there was some weird, like, there's value here. I just need to get it down, which is way more of an ego thing than it is practical, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe because I had built my other business already, so these concepts aren't foreign to me. But there was something about this specifically that I was like, no, I'm just maybe I got too lost in the attendance of it. This is getting psychological, but like, why didn't I do that is a really good
Mhm.
question. Knowing the things I know. I think people get married to ideas
Yeah,
or,
100%. And I
you
think
know,
that's a great piece of advice for anybody who wants to start their company, right? Or has an idea, because ultimately, you can't get too married, like you said, right? Or, emotionally attached to that idea,
hmm.
because it is very likely that it will fail or that no one is as passionate or interested as you are. Granted, today, I think with just access to social networks with billions of people on them, right, you're bound to find folks that fit in that niche, whatever your niche is, right? It just may not be big enough to start a company, right?
Yep.
It may be a passion project. And I think the piece of advice there is you need to go into building a company with that in mind, right? Because it is entirely possible that nobody else out there really wants it.
Hmm. Yep. And I've had opposite situations where everyone loves the idea, but you can't, like, you did your market research, the offer is great or whatever, but then you get the mom and dad syndrome where people are like, oh, that's a great idea, but then when they have to put money up for it, it's a completely different story. You know what I mean?
Yep.
The Google Slides, like, would you use this test? And then there's will you take out a credit card and give me money for this test? You know?
Yeah. And I think that's where that's your first kind of filtering process for entrepreneurship, right, in the
Hmm.
sense that, yeah, you've got to have conviction that you can do this. And if you've done your vetting, right, Google Slides, any prototyping tool you want to use, doesn't matter, we'll get into those, right? But once you kind of have that first, yeah, there seems to be traction here, then you have to go all in, right? And again,
Mhm.
going all in, it doesn't necessarily mean getting married to this thing. It means believing in it, also realizing and understanding that it may fail and go nowhere, but you can't half-ass it. You have to go all in, right? And yeah, I think that those are part of like just characteristics that people need to have, going into this and be aware of.
Mhm. That's a really good point. Um, did you have any final thoughts? I know we're getting close to where we wanted this to be in terms of time.
No, I think we covered, we covered what we were hoping to get today. I think what would be, potentially a good thing that we could walk through is as we're, building this
Mhm.
show, right? As you and I are talking about these things, to just walk people through and talk through, the things that we're doing for vetting
Mm,
this idea, right? Like, for
that's a
example,
great point.
next week we could talk about, what do we do to find the name, find
Yeah.
a domain, right? How do we go about figuring out what pieces of technology we might need for doing what
Mm,
we're doing here? And I think we can go into that, but that'll be for next week, because it's another probably long show just on its own.
yeah, 100%. Awesome.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, Scott. Always a pleasure
Thank you,
chatting.
Nathan. Yeah, you as well. I will see you next week.
See you next week.